Okay, so now that we talked about speciation, types, and mechanism, we can talk about the bigger picture, about what we think is happening over time and what is the major mechanism of speciation. So the way we will explore that is along the false debate of gradualism versus punctuated equilibrium. And then I will explore in depth an example over there to show you about how they're both right. As always, when people argue, usually they're both right. But just context is important. So let's dive into it. When you have exploration of those two things, gradualism and punctuated equilibrium, we need to think about it along those lines. Gradualism is the idea that species evolve gradually and there are little changes, so we can find in the fossil record, be that hypothesis the right one, we can find proofs of intermediary phenotype for each between species. So if we find at the present date with all those flowers, and we know the common ancestor will be this one, we should find hybrids, intermediaries between all of those types before we arrive there in the past. However, if the punctuated equilibrium is the theory of choice, we will not find gradation of changes, but little jumps. Like think about a staircase. So it would go from that plant to an ancestor to those two in that plant. And then there will be another speciation event when they differ drastically. So punctuated equilibrium is that theory that things change due to major change in the environment, and that leads to speciation that is rapid and all of a sudden, and then there's a little bit of a stagnation before another change in the environment. So sometimes a change in the environment is a little extinction, like a meteorite. So if you think about the major extinction event at 65 million years ago for the distinction between the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic, that would be what we know of as a fact right now. It's the impact of a meteorite, the covering of the sun by ashes. It's actually the Earth atmosphere, and all the ashes put in suspension via a volcano explosion at the same time led to a drastic change in temperature and photosynthesis, which led to the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs family. And the little shrews, they made it through, but those were our ancestors, and they gave birth to all of those, raised all the mammals, and now that's why the Cenozoic is the age of mammals, right? At the age zero here, today, we have something that's happening, and that we're all witnessing at the moment. It's the mass extinctions. We have 5 total, plus the 6th one that's happening now. Those number of species that are going extinct are major, and it's a lot of them, to the point that it's a 6th extinction. The speed of it is way faster. If you look at the diagram here, the speed of the extinction for the major extinction event here, it's still millions of years. You see, the scale is in millions of years. So this could be a million year long, but it took for the complete extinction of a dinosaur. It wasn't like boom, a meteorite and they all gone. It took a lot of time for the replacement of reptiles from the age of reptile to the age of mammals, right? However, here we're talking in 200 years, we have had a rate of extinction that is faster than any other extinction of the past that we have in the fossil record. So that 6th mass extinction is very, very big. And I mentioned that in lecture, and for my classes that are only online, I'll tell you that now. It is true that in the future, they will look back upon the Industrial Revolution as one of those major extinction events that will distinguish the Cenozoic age of mammal to the age of man, maybe that we'll call that's coming, or we call whatever it is, age of whatever, we'll come up with another name. But there is another age that is coming. We're not in the Cenozoic anymore. We just don't know it yet, because in 200 years, people will look back and say that was the event, the Industrial Revolution, that created that change based on evolutionary timeline. It checks out. Okay, so with that being said, now let's look at that example from the lizards here. So what I want to talk about here is in those Caribbean islands, you have species of lizards, and 58 on Cuba. There's a lot of other species in other islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and Jamaica, right? And those species are found on different ecotones or type on the trees. So you have the one that live in grass and bush here, the slender body, very long tail, long limb, brown color, they're elongated to hold on the grass, and they're down there. You have some that live on the lower trunk, so they have stocky body, long hind limbs, brown color to navigate those areas. The mid trunk, intermediate limb, short tail, gray color. both following the type of morph that helps preventing predation, but also the type of limbs is adapted to the location. And then you have those on top of the tree that are in the upper trunk canopy. They have really short limbs, but very large toe pads and long tail. They need to actually be able to hold on leaves, right? And if you test between those different species, they hold the one in the blue ecotone hold on leaves way better than the others. So with that being said, the question that came out was it punctuated equilibrium or gradualism that led to the speciation and the spread of all the species? If we think of it as punctuated equilibrium, we would think that a lizard arrives on an island and then there's an explosion of diversity and then they use all the ecotones. But the first lizard that comes in is one of the ecotones and then they speciate to open niches, which are like just environmental spaces. That's one hypothesis. The other one says gradualism. Little by little, lizards differentiate on each ecotones, and it takes time on each island to do that, right? So punctuated equilibrium, species diversify for different niches, and then boom, they disperse, and all the niches are used everywhere. So you have a punctuated equilibrium in the sense you go from one species to all the species, and then they disperse. But gradualism will say that on each island there is a gradual evolution of all the species on different ecological places, niches. When we look at the ecological data and we look at the actual DNA data of those lizards, we found that on different islands, different things happen. In some islands, we can trace it back to looking at the molecular clock, as we talked in the previous video, one of the previous videos. We can look at the fact that the one lizard arrived from one ecotone and then it dispersed, it speciated in different populations. So how that would happen if there's a lizard that arrived on the trunk here, canopy, upper trunk canopy in the blue ecotone. As soon as one of those individuals tend to use more of a trunk, there's a lot of resources there that is not used. So those lizards do very well, and then they start adapting to that trunk habitat, and they tend to converge to the same type as the mid-trunk species on other islands, right? That happened on some islands, and so on, and all the niches are used. On other islands, though, we have found that it was a dispersion of the different types to arrive on that island. So they occupied the niches after having speciated on the previous island. So you have a combination of the two factors depending on what we're looking at. It really doesn't make sense to say it's either gradualism or punctuated equilibrium. It's going to be a combination of both depending on the distance to the mainland, distance to the main place when you have a lot of species, and size of the island, time of dispersion. It depends on many things, right? Because if you have a species of a trunk that arrives on an island and no other ecotone is occupied, they start speciating, of course, because there's some dispersion of individuals. However, if in the middle of a speciation even a species arrives that's already adapted to that ecotone, they're going to take over, right? So you could have had gradualism taking place, but then you have a punctuated equilibrium event. So it's a little bit of both. It's a combination of both. So it's usually how things go when people think they're arguing. They're not really arguing, really. They're just both right. It all depends on context. So try to keep in mind the difference between gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. Keep in mind that we are at the end of the Cenozoic and a new age will come up. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. You guys take care. Bye.